This is the Boston Sports Pod, the podcast that brings you all things Boston sports with Joe and Shawn. Today is May 16th, 2014. I'm Shawn Klein, and my co-host is Joe Danker. What's up, Joe?
Hey, Shawnee.
So, how you doing after this loss?
Not so hot. Not so hot, man. I've been doing what I usually do after a crushing loss, and that's sports talk radio
Yeah.
and trying not to think about it. Um, yeah, I've been kind of flat since Wednesday night, just kind of going through the motions. It's like falling off a cliff.
Did you ever think that we were really going to lose this series? Did you think that somehow or other we were going to pull it out?
Yeah. Well, okay. Um, Up until the dump that we laid in Game 6. I never thought we were going to lose it. I always thought we were going to pull it out,
Yeah.
even when we were down 2-1 and all that, and games and all that. Um, but then I'll tell you, after that terrible game of Game 6, going into Game 7, I just didn't really feel. I didn't feel confident, and nothing that happened during Game 7 made me feel good. It's miserable.
It was
So no.
it was just shocking. I
Mm.
don't know about you, but to me, game seven, I mean, game six, okay, look, you're going to lay an egg, whatever, at times. You're going to have a bad game, some things don't go right, whatever. But game seven of a series, a playoff series against your rivals, how do you not show up? How do you come
That's
that
what I don't get.
unprepared? It seemed
I
unprepared to
know.
play. I mean, I don't want to say they're unprepared. They're
Yeah.
professionals. They were prepared to play. But how do you come out that flat and not able to get something going? I mean, that
I don't get it. I don't know. That's what I've been trying to figure out too.
well, that's what everyone's been trying to figure out, I think. I mean, just, listening to this Boston's talk radio and stuff. Just people are just sharing our shock. I don't think anyone expected us to lose this series. I mean, especially in the way that we did. It would have been one thing, and we still would have been crappy, but it would have been one thing if we, it comes down, it's 1-0, or it's we're going into overtime and it's just a lucky
Yeah.
shot, whatever, or it's just, you go down fighting. This just seemed like,
Right.
I don't want to say we rolled over, but because I mean I think they were trying, but it was like I don't understand why they couldn't get something going, and
No.
that's I mean, so let me ask you this: did they choke? Is this a choke? Does this qualify
Is
as
it
a
a
choke?
choke? Yeah, it does qualify as a choke. What do you think?
Well, they were the favorites, right? The Bruins were supposed
Certainly.
they were supposed to win. I think most prognosticators expected them to win. I think the Bruins expected them to win, and I think that's part of the problem. Is I think that the Bruins just somehow figured we'll get it done. It will happen, and
Mm,
didn't and just expected it to happen, and then
mm,
and then things just ran out of them, and they realized, oh shit, this might not happen, but it was too late, and I think that they just kind of believed, oh no, it will happen. They just, I think, and so I think a lot of the fans, I think everyone just sort of expected we'll find a way, we'll get it done, we'll go on to the next round, whatever happens, happens. And so they certainly were expected to win. They lost in a way that made them seem uncompetitive. That
mm.
made them seem like they weren't in those last two games at all.
No.
I mean, there was very little points where, I mean, at the end of the first and second periods, they seemed to get a little bit going, but it was too little, too late, and it was the end of the
Hmm.
period, and so it didn't carry, and it never carried over. And they continued to make mistakes. So, they had shots that they didn't finish, that they didn't, they were hidden posts, just, I mean, they certainly had opportunity, and they made mistakes, some of which, you have to say on both side, both ends, both in terms of the offense and the defense, that the mistakes made were forced by the Canadians. You got to give them credit there, but some of them weren't,
Yeah, you do.
you and so that to me sounds like, the definition of a choke. You're supposed to win. You don't play well enough to win. So it's not as if you show up. You even so if you're supposed to win, but you show up and you play as best as you could, and you play your best game and you lose, that's not a choke. But when you show up and you're better, you're supposed to be better, and you don't play up to that or even 80% of that, that to me seems like a choke. I mean, I hate to say it because I love this
Yeah,
team, but I mean, um, they seem to choke, and then frankly, I think some of their I was very disappointed in Lucic and some of the stuff
yeah,
that came out after, and all this
mm,
sort of stuff coming out now about these injuries. I mean, I respect these guys for playing through injuries and not complaining about it during, but I don't like immediately after you lose a series. Oh well, we had these injuries.
I
That
know.
I mean,
Sour
I'm not.
grapes ish.
Yeah, I don't see that really in the players doing that. That maybe it's the front office, maybe it's the media, or maybe it's just the way it's being spun, or just the timing of it. But it's uh, yeah, it feels like sour grapes. Certainly, Luchek's thing seemed kind of sour
Yeah,
grapes,
totally.
um,
Well, I
and
think you're definitely onto something there with the they never put in game seven, they never put together like a furious rush, a sense of I didn't even get a sense of urgency throughout the game. Like an extended, you know,
right.
assault. Like they just
Well,
they I think
there
maybe
were
they expected it to come and that raises in my mind questions about their leadership. As much
yeah,
as I love Chara, Bergeron, Rask can only do so much between the pipes, but Chara and Bergeron and Lucic and Thornton. Thornton's a leader. That's the time when leaders need to step up and rally the team and get them motivated and get that sense of urgency in them, similar to what last year in the World Series Big Poppy did.
right. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean there were times where there was a sense of urgency, but it always felt a little bit too late, right? Like
Mm,
in the at the end of the periods where they seemed to have a push, but it was just too late, and then the time would run out and they didn't have a time to really complete the push, so to speak.
mm,
They'd start the push, but it was sort of like in a horse race, well, you got the Preakness coming up tomorrow. Um, when you have a fast horse and you hold them back, and then you let them go, but it's too late and you don't have time to catch the leader.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
and so it's like, yeah, if you had just another, you know, uh, short distance, just another couple yards or another couple meters, that you could have, if there's 10 more meters or something like that, you would have won the race. But
Right.
you didn't have that. And so here I feel like, okay, at the end of the first period, certainly in the second period, it was like maybe if there was another minute they might have been able to,
Right.
to get something done, but it was too late. They started that push too late, and that I think was part of it. But they should have come out of the gate that way. I mean, this isn't a
Smoking.
horse
They
race.
should
Yeah,
have
they
come
should
out
have.
smoking.
Yeah, and they didn't. They came out and they just made stupid mistakes again. And
I know.
so,
Ugh.
I mean, we're not game analysts, but why do you think they lost? I mean, if you can identify two
Well,
things, or one or
yeah.
two things of
Well,
why they lost.
the biggest reason is the lack of production from their top line. Their top
Yeah.
line, Krejci, Lucic, and Iginla did not perform at all during the playoffs. Iginla had a couple of tipped goals, but he looked old and slow. Krejci, who historically always is a point per game player in the playoffs, um, he's like clockwork. He steps it up big time in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Didn't do it this year, and I don't
Nope.
understand why. And Luch had some contributions in Detroit and tried to get physical in the Montreal series, but they were just non-existent. If that line had just even played half, even produced at half the rate that you would expect them to, that they did in the regular season, we would have won that series in 6 games. But they just didn't show up. That's the one big reason, in my opinion. The other one is I think the youth on defense did come back to bite us, particularly Barkowski.
Yeah.
And that goes back to our failure to make a significant move at the trading deadline. Not to get too deep into it, but we got Mazzaros, who didn't play the last two games, and
No,
Barkowski had some stupid penalties and made some costly turnovers and looked like the young kid that he is. So I had to identify. And you know what? Actually, another big reason, Rask. He's a great goalie. Don't get me wrong, but for whatever reason, he did not play. He did not steal us a single game. He had a great shutout. Okay, but do you remember any period where he stood on his head and held off the Canadians? I
no.
can't recall one. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like he did not steal us a game.
I mean, he had
Thomas had
some.
to do that numerous times. He had some great saves, don't? Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I
he
mean, he
didn't
had some
have.
great
There was not
points in
that
the
one.
games and good games. I mean, he played. He had some games where he played more average. I don't think he ever played poorly, but I think he
No,
was
he never played
average,
poorly.
and he was good at times, and he had certainly great saves. But yeah, there wasn't a feeling that it certainly turned the tables the way Price kept them in this series. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, he was
you
good.
don't.
He was steady, but he never stood on his head.
Yeah.
And Price did a couple of times at least,
Oh
and
yeah. I mean, that first
that's what you
game.
need
I mean,
sometimes. Oh
that
my
first
God, yeah.
game. I mean, we should have won that game for nothing. You know.
And that first game set the tone in a lot of ways
Yeah.
for themes throughout the series of missing opportunities, of hitting the post, 13 hit posts or crossbars. I mean, and we got into that last time how
Right.
that's the reasons for that. But we were snake bit throughout the series. Frustrating as hell, Sean. And the Bruins are the last team I would expect to come out flat like that.
Right.
They're a well coached team. They're a well led team. They're a veteran team. They've been in this position numerous times before in the playoffs. They have championship pedigree. They have all the tools, and I just don't understand how, like you said, they can come out flat in Game 6, in Game 7, and just get outplayed.
So, do you see this as more a Bruins loss than a Canadiens win? You know what I mean when I ask
Yeah,
that? Like, I mean,
yeah.
how much
You?
of the mental mistakes,
Mm.
the puck luck, the the lack of being able to really get anything going, how much of that was the Habs just getting us off our game, either mentally by getting into our heads in certain ways, or otherwise, in terms of X's and O's, so to speak, that I mean, certainly in some ways they were clogging lanes that we couldn't get shots off,
They certainly
and
were,
and
but we're
so
good
that
enough
was
to have gotten around that.
so we thought.
I
Or
thought we
maybe.
were right.
Okay. Yeah.
So, well, to answer your question, Sean, I
Yeah.
think it's more Bruins loss. Now, it's easy being a Bruins fan to see things through the Bruins lens and come to that conclusion. But, and maybe time will, if I read about some more analysis of the series, I'll change my opinion. But from what I saw, the Bruins didn't play their game. And I didn't necessarily see the Canadians doing anything in particular to get us off our game. That's what's so
Okay.
frustrating. You mentioned the block shots. Okay, we've beat teams like that. We beat the Rangers in the playoffs last year. They blocked a million shots, and they had good sticks, as they say. Clogging the passing lanes, all that stuff. Well, the Bruins are good enough to work around that and score some goals, but they didn't. So I can't put it. I put it more on the Bruins just
Yeah.
not getting it done than the Canadians doing anything exceptional to frustrate us.
Well, that's a good
What do you
point. I
think?
mean, in terms of not seeing what the Canadians were doing specifically to get us off our game, because I was thinking, just going back like we talked about in the last podcast about the Patriots and Giants Super Bowls. I mean, we Patriots didn't really play their game, but in large part, certainly the first one, that had a lot to do with what the Giants were doing defensively in their front four,
That's right. That's
right? So
right.
you can identify that that the defensive line was beating our offensive line, and that's where we lost that game. We didn't get to play our game because of that. Whereas it is hard to pinpoint anything in particular. I mean, there's things that the Canadians were doing that probably threw us off a little bit. So maybe it was more just the sum is greater than the parts, that they were doing this, that, that we
Mm,
can counter, but all of it together and then adding in some other stuff just kind of uh, led to that collapse, so to speak. So
yeah.
it just kind of ate away. Wasn't like a major obstacle in our way. They just sort of chipped
Mm,
away and ate away at us, and I mean, so do you think how much of this was mental? Like how much of this was just the shit going back and forth between Subban and Thornton and Lucic and Weiss and stuff? I mean, how much of that do you think was like the Canadians getting into our heads? How much of that do you think was an effect, or do you think that's mostly just, fans talking?
I don't think there's too much to that.
Yeah.
I just don't. What do you think? I
Yeah,
mean, I don't.
I don't think so. I mean, maybe a little bit just because it is the Canadians. We don't play well there. Certainly, Bartowski seemed affected by playing in Montreal. He seemed better in Boston than he did in Montreal, although not in Game 7. Um, but so there's some of that, but I don't think that that was the difference maker. Um,
No.
and
And you can see we got into Subban's head. Was it game 5? When Thornton sprayed the water and he seemed to be melting down a little bit in that game. So I think it
yeah,
went both ways. I don't think it was a deciding factor. Now,
yeah.
the mental aspect that I do think played a bit of a role, and I'm shocked that it did. Maybe this has something to do with why they were so flat. Is that they don't play well against the Canadians. And Chara said something to the extent of he thought the team was nervous going into Game 7.
Mm.
Recent history against the Canadians with this particular team maybe started to eat away at their confidence against them. And maybe that's why they didn't come out and play well. I don't know. I'm not so sure about that, but it's food for thought.
Yeah. Yeah, that there could be something to that. I mean, like I mentioned last time, how my friend said, just pretend they're the Red Wings and you'll beat them, And so there is some element of the history there with the Canadians um, that I think affects it in some way. What do you think this means, big picture wise, legacy wise? We talked about this on the Sports Ethicist podcast, like a month ago. Um, what is I guess it's still next year, so it's the history still can be written, but I mean if up until this point with this current regime, Shirelli and Claude and the current Chara and stuff, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? Is
um, I don't think much, actually. Their core is still, for the most part, young. They've still got quite a window of opportunity. The emergence of Dougie Hamilton in the playoffs, really, and all season too, to replace Chara, I think is huge for this window to remain open. I think we're seeing Chara. I'll answer your question, but seeing Chara for the second year in a row fade. Now I know he broke his finger, and that certainly contributed to some of his mistakes. Game 6, Game 7, whatever. But his legs didn't seem to. He didn't seem to have his legs. He wasn't skating very well. So I think Chara is going to be less emphasized again. Or again, he has to be de-emphasized a bit over the next year or two in order to keep the run going. So I think as far as a legacy, this one stinks. This hurts, but I do think that they'll be back in it again next year. So I think they have several years, 2, 3, 4 years left to continue to write the legacy or
now
improve on their legacy.
if they don't win another cup in the next 2 3 years,
Mm.
how
Then,
do we view this team, this period?
hmm. As an excellent team that won one cup, blew a great opportunity to win another one, and never could get back to it, and wasted an opportunity because of their great young core of experienced players. I mean,
Okay.
rarely do you have that. You have a core of star players who are experienced but still in their prime. I mean, that's a gift. It's gonna. I would say the legacy would be that they wasted their opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right to me.
Mm.
If they win another cup, then I think they'll go down as one of the one of the
Mm.
great Boston teams. Certainly
Yeah.
in the contemporary era. But
So speaking of collapses,
yeah,
where do you think this one ranks?
like in like all of Boston sports.
Well, yeah, and or in Bruins collapses. All of Boston
That's
sports is probably a richer
yeah.
subject there.
I don't think it rates. Well, I mean, it's up there. It's not. I think because it was kind of slow, kind of built through the whole series. It didn't feel like a stomach punch, you know?
Mm.
Like so that I think the fact that we kind of saw it coming, if we were looking for it, you could see it. Certainly in retrospect, like you said, we can look back from game one uh, and see the elements of what was happening, that they weren't getting the shots in, that the Canadians were playing better. So when you kind of look back, it does you could see the train coming that they were going to lose this series. Um, and so it doesn't it doesn't feel like a stomach punch. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So that decreases some of it within the pantheon. Um, so what would you say?
Well, big picture, this team won the President's Trophy, was the best team by a good margin throughout the regular season. This team steamrolled through the league in March. This is the what I thought was the best Bruins team. I thought this team was better than the team that won the cup 3 years ago. So the macro of that, the macro picture of that, um, them not winning the cup or at least not getting to the cup finals, um, I think is a actually I think will go down in history in Boston lore as I have it ranked as the second biggest Bruins collapse, defeat, failure, choke job, whatever you want to call it.
To
The
the
number
Flyers
one,
loss?
oh no, that's a good call though, Shawn. That team was
Yeah.
not so good. That's a good one. That's probably up in the
Yeah, but
top five.
you were up in that series 3-0 at one point,
I
and then
know that
in
was
game
that's
seven
probably
you were up 3-0.
I know that's probably the worst choke job. Yeah,
Oh,
uh,
that was
but
terrible.
the 1970 71 Bruins were similar, steamrolled. That was Bobby Orr in his prime, Phil Esposito, Derek Sanderson, steamrolled the regular season. They were awesome. They were reported even better than this team, and first round Canadians knocked them out. So
Yeah.
that's probably got to be number one. But this one I think may go down as number two. So,
Wow.
but in all Boston sports lore, this one's not even going to crack the top five. Might be in the top 10. I don't know. I
Hmm.
got some other big ones out there. I know you got some too, but
Yeah,
I think it was a big one for the Bruins, man. Really big one.
you'd have to really sit down and think about that. You kind of put me on the spot there, so I don't know. Uh, but yeah,
Well, how
it's
about this? One more question about that. What is, I think we can both agree, the biggest job ever in the history of Boston sports? The biggest, the worst failure. Okay, now wait, maybe I'm rethinking it actually. There's two
well,
that could,
we gotta keep it in our lifetimes. I mean,
right.
because
Yes.
it's hard to quantify, you know, some of the Ted Williams,
Oh,
the
right,
World
you're right.
Series and stuff against Cardinals.
Well, I'll put
But
the two out there. How's that?
what's
86
that?
Red Sox,
Yeah,
86 Red Sox, '07 Patriots. What do you think? All right, that's yeah, maybe a topic for another day.
yeah, I got to think about that. Certainly Buckner.
Yeah,
Uh, I think given what was at stake in the '07 Patriots, a
it's number
perfect
one.
season. Yeah, I mean, because if it wasn't a perfect season at stake,
Mm.
it wouldn't be up there. I even think I mean, it was a great team, but the Giants played really well defensively in that game. So, um, but given what was at stake and the fact that we still could have won it, even in the end, if things had
Mm.
gone a different way, um, that's so cliche. Of
I
course, if they
know,
had
right?
gone a different way, right?
We could have
So, but
won.
no, but I mean, we talked a little bit about that last time. A couple of things just on
Yeah.
that one play that, that could have really, um, in all plausibility, have gone a different way. Any
Mm.
one of those like five or six things in just like one play go differently, and we win the game. But given what was at stake in that, yeah, that's up there. And the trauma that you still feel from it. I mean, we still talk about the
Mm.
Buckner, obviously. I mean, the trauma from Buckner has been healed because
Yes.
of the success of the Red Sox in the last 10 years. Um, the Patriots is still an open wound, so
Yeah.
and in some ways can never be healed. I mean, if we win it,
Mm.
if
Unless we
if
go 18-0, you know,
right, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I mean,
and win the Super Bowl.
even if Belichick and Brady win another Super Bowl in the next 2, 3 years, there still is that opportunity for a perfect season that it's almost impossible. It's
Yeah.
unthinkable that you could
Yeah.
do that again. Um, and so that's yeah. So that puts it up there as yeah, great. Now I'm really depressed. So between this and that, all right,
Yeah. I'm
back.
sorry.
That's right. Back to the Bruins. Um,
Yeah. Well,
so
can I
what?
say this,
What?
Sean?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You had a question?
No, go. You go.
Well, okay. The future of the team. And I don't want to get
That's
too
exactly
deep.
where I was gonna go.
Where are you? Well,
Yeah.
here's one thing that I wanted to bring up is the Bruins just had they were an incredible team. They were. They really were. Best team I've ever seen. Okay, in my lifetime. And they didn't win the cup. I feel right now like, wow, who cares about next season until the playoffs? Because they could steamroll through the league again next year, and they let me down this year. So why am I gonna? But they'll hook me back in. I know it.
Oh
But at
yeah,
this point
yeah.
right now, I'm like, and I felt this way about the Patriots. Of some of their recent excellent teams that have either lost in the AFC Championship game or lost the Super Bowl. Like, okay, well, we got a whole nother season ahead of us, and they could be a brilliant team, go 14-2, and still not win it. And it's like, God, what do I got to do? I mean, maybe the Bruins need to be the sixth seed and win the cup that way. I don't know. This team had everything, and they didn't win it, so it just makes me really depressed. Looking, I mean, I have to wait another year plus to see if this team can win again because I'm not going to even if they steamroll through the regular season, I'm not going to go now. Oh well, this team's really going to win the cup because they didn't this time. They let
Well,
me down. I'm angry.
here's no, and I feel your anger, right? And I
Thank
share
you.
it.
Awesome.
However, the championships are really hard to win. And when was the last time the President's Trophy winner won the cup?
I think the Blackhawks last year, Sean.
Really?
But I get your point. I get your point. It's extremely rare. It barely ever happens.
Right. So, given that, or the top seed in any sport, right, goes on and wins their championship. That seems like something that it doesn't often happen. I mean, in fact, it usually goes the other way, that the best team doesn't win. I mean, that's one of the arguments against playoffs. If you look
Mm,
at something like the Premier League and a lot of the soccer, they don't have playoffs. Everybody
mm.
plays each other, um, and and I think everybody plays each other, at home and then away. And the team with the best record is the champion of the
Mm,
league because they've played everybody and they've beat them.
mm.
And so then to go into a playoff at that point allows for fluky things, officiating,
Is
weird
that why
punk.
they have it set up that way for that express purpose?
I think it's, I, I think it's more organic. I mean, that's just the way.
Okay.
Because I mean, if you think back to baseball, right? Um, you won the pennant. You didn't win the pennant, so you'd win the American League or you'd win the National League based on your record. There was no
Right.
playoffs, and then they had the
Right.
World Series
Right.
between the two leagues who never played. So it was really this kind of separate thing, and in a way, it was almost comparable to what the Champions League is in Europe in soccer, right? It was almost
Mm-hmm.
something separate from the league, and it isn't until later that you start to add in the playoffs. And I think um, I'd have to look back at the history of some of the other American sports, but I think for the most part, most of them start that way of there really isn't a championship game. There isn't a playoff system. That's something that's a feature that comes later. I'm torn because playoffs are exciting. They're they're fun.
Hmm.
They heighten everything about the sport. Um, but I don't think that the winner of the championship is necessarily the best team. And I think
Correct.
that we have to disambiguate that connection that we think uh, is that too
Do
big a
what
word
to
for you?
it?
Disambiguate. Sorry. The
I just learned what ambiguous means like 2 years ago. You throw all kinds of prefixes and
sorry.
suffixes. I don't know what to think.
I could have said
Disambiguate.
contradistinction.
What?
No.
I don't even know what that means either. Jesus.
Sorry. Sorry. I do have a PhD in philosophy. It happens sometimes.
Yeah, I
But I think
don't.
we do we do need to distinguish between that those can be different things. That you can be the champion but not be the best team. I mean, look, really, does anyone think that the 2007 Giants were the best team in the NFL just
No.
because they won the Super Bowl? No, they go on a tear.
No.
And we talk about that in all the sports. You get hot at the right time. You have
Yeah.
you have two pitchers that are hot and are just pitching lights out.
Yeah. And
You
hockey's
have
the most notorious for having
the
that
goalie,
phenomenon.
right? You have a goalie and you make a run. In football, you get hot at the right time, right? You don't want to peak too early. People talk
Yeah.
about that all the time. And there's a certain truth to that. And so, it changes the dynamic of that. So I'm not against playoffs because, like I said, I mean they're so awesome, right? I mean they're so exciting. It just ramps
Mm.
everything up, but it does. The two drawbacks are one, it does seem to devalue the regular season, particularly in sports like basketball and hockey that have a very long regular season. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Baseball is different. Baseball obviously has a very long regular season, but it's the ebb and flow of the regular season that you love about baseball. The
Yeah.
playoffs are exciting, but if you love baseball, the regular season is is part and parcel of the whole thing. It's just
Totally.
it's just part of the ebb and flow of it. So I think it's different. But I think
Yeah, it
and
is.
then the NFL, because the season's so short, it doesn't really devalue it. It happens, it's not as much as like in college football where you can lose you can lose your ability to win any kind of championship in the first week, right? That's You're not going to do that in the NFL, but there still is a sense of each game has an importance uh, for in terms of setting how things are going to play out in the playoffs. Seeding, um, and divisional wild card and all those kind of things. So most of those games matter. Where, in basketball and hockey, the regular season doesn't really seem to matter that much. And it for people who love the sport, it's fun to watch. But I think ultimately it doesn't really determine much about the playoffs, right? I mean,
Right.
home ice is important. Last change is important.
Mm.
Particularly for teams that are much more strategic. But you know, that's not as significant as home field, I think, in some other sports. Um, and and then the seeding. I mean, the playoffs are so long that even if you're top seed, you still have a lot of games to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so the seeding isn't as important,
No.
or at least it feels that way, at least some years. So, yeah, I mean, I think it does kind of take away somewhat from the regular season, uh, but I'm still excited about it, and I mean the fact that they had such a great regular season, and if they come back and they have a great regular season, I'm still going to be excited about them going into the playoffs. Um,
Sure.
and are you gonna feel like, all right, well, we got. I mean, I don't feel like even in retrospect we felt like we had an easy pass to the cup anyway. I mean, I think
No.
we looked at this. I mean, the first series looking at Detroit, it's like, oh, great,
Mm.
we're the one seed, and we get to play Detroit. Oh,
Right.
like we should get more of a break here. But Detroit was a
Right.
very
That
good
was an
team. Now,
easier series than we anticipated it to be.
oh yeah, and then you got to go and play the Canadiens, which is a tough team. And then I mean, um, then we would have had to play the Rangers, another tough team, and then whoever
Hmm.
comes out of the West, which would be a tough team. I mean, all these are great teams. It's the playoffs, so it's I never. I mean, I had an expectation that we were going to get to the Stanley Cup,
Yeah.
and I did feel like we had a good shot, but you know I, I don't
If we went
feel
up
like
against the Blackhawks, I would. That's a 50-50.
I don't know. I mean, they're coming on. I mean, Kane and Taves are just. I think we would
Mm.
have had a tough time stopping them, just like we did last year.
Yeah.
Now we might have been able if our first line started playing better, then we might have been able to put more pucks in the goal. Crawford isn't the same
No.
isn't as solid as he was last year. So I think that would have given us a better shot. But we would have had a really tough time stopping Kane and Taves, and I think
Yeah.
they're going to win. I think they're going to win the cup again this year.
I think they are too. Yeah.
Yeah, which just depresses me. I mean, I have
Or it could be the Canadians.
yeah, which there is always that virtue of losing to the team that eventually goes on to win the cup. It kind of makes you feel a little bit better because you feel like, all
Nope.
right,
Nope.
it
Not at all.
makes me feel a little bit better because
Don't
I
get me
look at it.
puking my cereal if the Canadians win the cup.
No, I get that. I get that. But it does. Here's why it makes me feel a little bit better. It makes me feel like, okay, well, they're the team that went on to win the cup. Okay,
I
so
know.
I don't feel as bad about losing to them. Like I don't feel like,
I
okay, well,
know.
but at the same time, the flip side of it is, fuck, we could have beat them, and if they won the cup, we could have won the cup.
I
So
know.
it kind of cuts both ways. But um, in terms of the Blackhawks winning, you know, I have a lot of good friends here that are Blackhawks
Yes.
fans,
I will
and
root for
many of them are quite gracious um,
them.
to me. They did not gloat last year. They did not gloat this year when the Bruins. They were very sympathetic, um, and I appreciate that. Uh,
Hmm.
there are a few who will make it very hard for me to live peacefully here amongst them.
Amongst
So,
them.
uh, but by and large, I mean, I have a great respect for Chicago-based fans. They are great fans. They love their sport. And then when it comes to the hockey, I mean, they really love hockey. I mean, these the people out here are almost Canadians in the way that they love
Mm.
hockey. They're knowledgeable. They're knowledgeable hardcore fans. So I respect them. There's not a lot of sort of casual fans here. I mean, and they got the Cubs and they got the White Sox and these people they root hard for their teams and the Bulls and stuff. I mean, they live and die by them in the way that Boston fans do, and I respect that a lot. Um, so, but I
Well,
don't
I
have to.
respect the Blackhawks, but you don't want them to win.
Well, if I was anywhere else, it's just having to live around.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It would just and then to have them go back to back and then everyone being like, oh,
No, I
it just
know.
makes it that much more painful. But I mean, it's more me than them. I mean,
Yeah.
there's very few that have been obnoxious about it. Now they may be obnoxious now, winning back to back, but for the most part, they haven't been. So it's been easier. I mean, I can imagine that if I lived like in Pittsburgh or something like that, and the Steelers and those kinds of fans, that would just be terrible. And when I lived in New
Oh
York,
God,
when I lived in New York, it was awful. I mean, the Yankee fans were brutal, brutal.
they're the worst.
Yeah, and half of the fans that were brutal to me, you know, were were not real fans. I mean, they weren't hardcore fans. I mean, they were casual fans. They were like, "Oh, well, I'm a Yankee fan. Yeah,
Yeah.
who's pitching
Right.
tonight?" They don't know anything about
Jeter.
it. Yeah, Jeter's pitching. Did you see him with like no hair, man? He's losing his hair. He looks terrible. Did you
Really? I think he
see?
should retire. Oh yeah, he is.
Yeah, he is. He is. I think the Sox are still in a rain out. Um,
Yeah, that's what I heard.
but oh, it's so back to the
So
Bruins though.
yeah,
Um, so going forward,
yeah.
what do you think needs to change? Now we've talked about Marchand or
Yep.
Marchand, whatever the hell you want to call
I'll
him.
call him whatever I want to. He sucks.
And I feel like most Bruin fans that I've talked to and what I've heard on the radio is most people want him to go. We're done. We're
Yeah.
ready. We're ready for him
Yep.
to go.
Yep.
Um, and so who else though? Who else do you think? What
Okay.
other kind of changes do you think needs to be had? Do you think um, Bartkowski, you talked about him. He's making a lot of mistakes. He's young. He's good, but he's young. He's made some mistakes. Maybe you can move him for something. You got Boychuk, who's um, you know, uh, maybe a movable piece, just given contract and so on. There's some other guys maybe that you could talk about possibly moving. What do you moving on
Well,
from?
I wouldn't actually make too many changes in the D, personnel wise. Remember, we have Seidenberg coming back. I
Yep.
would probably, I would listen. Chara, like I said earlier, 2 years in a row has become a bit of a liability in the playoffs, for whatever reason. Now, it's got to be age, legs, whatever it is. So I think we need to de-emphasize Chara's role in the defense a little bit and get maybe somebody like Dougie Hamilton up on that first line pairing more. Seidenberg, Dougie Hamilton. I think trying to make that shift away from Chara um, to Dougie Hamilton, I think has to be done on defense. Bartkowski, I think we need to continue to develop him. He's pretty skilled. I think he can be a good defenseman. Um, so I don't think making a move now. Listen, I mean, I wouldn't hold on to him if there's another piece out there we can get for him. I'm not saying that, but I wouldn't look to move any of the defensemen. I would look to bring in a defenseman. That would make that if I were Chiarelli, I would make that a an off-season priority. Look to beef up the defense, but I don't look at any of the defensemen right now and say they got to go. You mentioned Boychuk. I like Boychuk. Boychuk,
I like him a
he
lot. Yeah.
has his. He's got a great shot. He's a good defenseman. He's not great. Takes too many risks. Has some turnovers, but the pluses for Boychuk, I think, far outweigh the minuses. So that's what I'd look to do on the defense. Iginla, I think, needs to go away.
So you wouldn't
He
pick
had
that.
30.
You wouldn't pick him up again.
No, I think we need to get. I think the offense. This goes back to Tyler Sagan. He didn't do it in
That's
the playoffs last year either. But we need a sniper. We need a freaking goal scorer. Okay, if we had somebody like that on our first line with paired with Krejci and Luch, someone who just can get you 40 or 50 goals just with a setup with a rifle shot. Someone like Steven Stamkos. I hate to say the name, but Max Pacioretty, someone who's just a gifted goal scorer. We don't have a gifted goal scorer on our team. We need that. It came back to haunt us again against the Canadiens. We thought Sagan was going to be that guy, and it turns out he is that guy. He had a great year out in Dallas, but he didn't get it done here in Boston. Maybe it was system, a lot of things going on there. But we need someone who we can count on to play some defense, but who's a God-given goal scorer. Easier said than done. But I think that's a big change, and he's got to be our first line winger. And Ginla does not need to be our first line winger because he also, being 35, 36 years old, faded. I heard he was injured too, but faded dramatically in the playoffs. Looked slow, looked old,
Mhm.
couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. So, and like you said, Marchand. So those are the significant changes. Now, Soderberg also made leaps and bounds forward in the playoffs. He's somebody who I think we need to look at more closely, and
Yeah.
he's the third line center right now. I mean, our centerman, Krejci, Bergeron, and Soderberg, beautiful, actually. That's great. Keep that. But changing the wingers around, I think, is what we need to look at a little bit.
Was the Sagan deal a mistake?
No, no way. He wouldn't have got it done in Boston.
Okay.
He's an offense first kind of guy, just like Phil Kessel. He wasn't defensively accountable. That never really works in Boston. Now, there's the argument that says, well, you can't have a sniper who plays defense. No, well, they're rare talents that really can find that balance. But Sagan was that guy, but he didn't show up in the playoffs at all last year again. He had a pretty good season last year. He just didn't show up in the playoffs.
But do you think
So
we gave up on him too early, or was it just the combination of the poor playoff play and the kind of contract that we were going to have to give him that just wasn't quite fitting, and so it was more of it's time to move the chip because we got it. There's a window here for him. If we hold on to him, we're going to have to pay him. We're not going to be able to move him, or
yeah,
or Do you think of something
I,
like that kind of, do you think we just
I
gave
think
up
there's
on him too early?
uh,
He was a young guy.
no.
He's got a lot of talent.
I know. I still don't think you gave up on him too early because I just don't think he was gonna blossom in Boston. I
Yeah.
just
Okay.
don't think. I think
Yeah.
I just
If
don't.
you don't think he's gonna if you don't think he's gonna be the guy you want him to be, no matter what kind of talent he has, if he's not gonna fit in your system, you don't think he's gonna fit in your system, then yeah, get rid
Right.
of him. Then you
Uh,
might as well move
so
him.
that's yeah. And
Now,
we ended up getting Louis Erickson, whom I like. We ended up getting
right,
Riley Smith, who had a
right,
breakout season. So I'm good
yeah.
with that. But
Um,
neither of those guys are grade A snipers. So
okay. What about Thornton?
um, keep him for cheap money.
Keep him. Yeah.
I mean, his contributions on the ice have decreased quite a bit this past season, but his contributions in the locker room, I think, are still very strong. Um, I think having an enforcer, so to speak, he can still play. He's not a liability on the ice. Um, I think he's a rare combination of someone who can play out there and not, you can put the biscuit in the basket once in a while, and he's a decent offensive player, but still can roughhouse when need be and play the role of the enforcer, and that unwritten code in hockey of protecting the skilled players. I think he's valuable for that, so I'd renew him for cheap money. What
Hmm.
do you think?
Yeah, I know.
You
I
think
mean,
differently?
no, I'd keep Thornton around. Again, at the right price, right?
Right.
I mean that's always sort of a given in these conversations. But yeah, I think at a reasonable contract, um, he's got the sort of leadership skills in his own way. I mean, he's a different kind of leader than someone like Bergeron, but I think he's got a feel of the locker room. He's got he's a fan favorite. I think, I think that some of the rougher stuff he does on the ice, I can be torn on it. Some of the stuff I think is important and okay. Some of I think he loses control sometimes, right?
He did twice
And
this past year, which was not
yeah,
really characteristic of him. It was kind of odd to see. Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, we've talked before, and I got a couple things on my blog about hockey fights and so on.
Mm,
And I'm not a big proponent of them.
mm,
And um, but in the whole enforcer thug thing, I'm not a big on. But I think there still is a place and an important place for an aggressiveness for someone who is still hard hitting, someone who's going to punish the other team within the confines of the game itself in terms of the
mm,
rules and so on. And I think Thornton is important for that, and I think he's important for the bench and so on. And I think he's kind of a personality guy, in the sense
hmm
of some of the glue that might be in there in terms of you start mixing things up and bringing in different guys, you start to lose the personality of the team, and I think Thornton is
mm.
a part of that.
That's a good
So
point. I agree.
yeah, so I mean at the right price, and it seems like he'd be willing to stay at a
I
reasonable
think
price.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, Ginla, I yeah, he's probably not coming back. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Look,
Um,
he scored 30 goals, but you know
yeah,
what? That doesn't matter. That didn't matter. Without the 30 goals that he scored, we still would have been in the playoffs. What
yeah.
really mattered to me is what he did in the playoffs, and that was nothing. And he became a light. I forget what game it was. We started off. He fell down twice. He tripped on the ice. He shot two or three shots wide of the net. Like he had one good goal in the Canadian series. I think he had many other opportunities to score goals, and he just missed the net so much. And forget about it. No, I'm good. It reminds me of like Wes Welker. Like I'll take Wes Welker 122 passes in the regular season, but drop the ball in the most important game in the Super Bowl or in the AFC Championship game. Well, you know
Right.
what? Take your 122 catches and go somewhere else. Catch the ball in the Super Bowl that really matters. Again, take your 30 goals, go somewhere else. Score the goal that really matters in the playoffs. That's the kind of player I want. So,
So you have any thoughts on anybody that they should try to go after? Like when we talked last time about a little
no.
bit about Supan or Subban, whatever the hell his name is, but I don't think they can
Yeah.
afford him.
Yeah, I don't know. I still too early. Not even in the off season yet, really. For me to know who's going to be a free agent or anything like
Right.
that. Maybe in a few weeks, couple months, we can
There's no one like
address
sort
that
of on,
again.
no one on your wish list of sort of like, all, salary cap, free agency aside, if you could just pick a guy that we could get.
Um, nah, you put me on the spot. I can't think of
Yeah, I know.
anybody.
Yeah.
I'd have to I'd have to look at that a little bit more, man. I
Well, then
mean,
it becomes
yeah,
that wide open. You say someone like Kane or Taves or someone like that, but you're not going to
yeah.
get them. But
Well, we've
so
got our Taves. I mean,
yeah.
Bergeron is Taves, although Taves more gifted offensively. But they're two very similar players in many ways. And yeah, someone like Patrick Kane. Kane seems to be that. I mean, he fits on the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks are a defensively responsible team. I respect the way they play the game, and he still lights up the scoreboard. And he's got that rare talent. He's a sniper. He's a gifted player. Somebody like Patrick Kane. I'd love to have Kane on my team.
Um, one thing I wanted to ask you about that we haven't really touched on is Claude. Do you
Mm.
how much of this loss do you put on him?
I don't know, man. I'm not sure. Um, well, was coaching why they came out flat in game 6 and 7?
I mean,
You know,
you got to think that that's got to contribute. I mean,
sure,
that's
sure,
part of the coach's job, I would think,
yeah,
is to get. I mean, it's not like it's college basketball or football where you got to go in and give the speech. Like
right,
um, that Netflix commercial. Have you seen that commercial where the guy's like, um,
yeah. That movie where the
"Have
guy
you seen
gives
that
the
movie
speech,
that gives a speech?" That's what I'm saying.
right?
They're like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, okay,
yeah,
go." Right? Yeah, that's it's
right.
ridiculous, but. Um, uh, uh, that you don't expect that, but there's still got to be some adjustments. I mean, you didn't really see a lot of adjustments. There's some couple line changes here and there, a little bit between like the
Mhm.
third and fourth line. The in the seventh game, certainly they shrunk the line a little bit. They didn't really have much of a fourth line going out. Um,
Yeah, but that's
so
typical. That's very common.
yeah, there wasn't any major shakeup. There wasn't anything that you saw going on that made you think that they were doing anything differently.
No,
And so
and
that
I think
that that
Claude should
strikes
have
me as a
changed
bit
up.
of coach.
Yeah, Claude should have changed up his first line a little bit.
Yeah.
He really should have. I mean, I think I said something to you or texted something to you during Game 6 or something like that. Put Riley Smith up on. Maybe we talked about this on a podcast. Put Riley Smith up on the first line, and get a Ginla off the first line. Dude, make some changes. Put Soderberg on the first line. Switch Soderberg and Krejci. The way Soderberg was playing, put him in between Iginla and Lucic. I have seen that happen. I have seen it happen when a coach just makes a quick change and boom, 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 the scoreboard lights up.
Well, and it
Probably
was
happen
it,
than
you
it
know
does,
what
but I've seen it happen.
and what harm could it have done? I mean, it's
Yeah,
the
right. They
first
weren't
line.
doing it anyway.
Yeah, the first line
Yeah.
wasn't making it happen. So make it
Yeah.
happen and try something different and see how it goes. And so
Yeah.
I don't lay it at his feet, but I think he was a part of it. Um, But so, part and parcel of that, I don't see them as needing to blow things up. Maybe a few
No.
changes here or there, depending on what's out there. I mean, you never know. If you could package like a Boy, Boychuk, Boychuk with, some another player, younger player, and get some, you know, big name back, something like that. You never know what's going to happen out there. But just in terms of like actually actively looking. I don't see a lot of changes. I mean, certainly Marchand, probably not bringing back Ngala. I don't know about Thornton, but I don't know. And then trying to think. There's somebody else I'm thinking of that I can't. I'm losing. There's someone else. I feel like we're
Defenseman.
leaving. I don't know. I just feel like we're leaving somebody out of the discussion here of someone who might stay or might leave, and
Okay, well, there's Lucic, Krejci, Iginla, Bergeron, Riley Smith, and Marchand. There's Soderberg, Erickson, and Paille, Frazier. Then you got Thornton, mix it up, with Campbell. Campbell's a centerman on the Merlot line. Um,
Yeah,
that's
maybe
pretty
I
much
don't know.
everybody.
Yeah. Well,
There's
now,
Ryan Spooner coming up. Oh, Jordan Caron.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so I guess we're not. I mean, just maybe I was, or maybe I was thinking Krejci, like in terms of the way, the way you're talking about, Ginla's failures um, to score. Well, Krejci was failing to do anything either, but you're willing. I don't
yeah.
want to say you're willing to forgive him, but it seems like you're willing to give him a bit of a pass and not think like it. Now, partly it's because his contract isn't up, right? Whereas
Mm,
we'd have to go out and sign you know,
mm.
it, and so that's different. If you have a guy, you're not necessarily going to look to move him, but if you have a choice of bringing him back or not. So I mean, if Krejci's contract was up and we had to sign him, what would you say? Keep him or let him go?
That's a real good question, Shawn. I would say keep him. I would say keep him because what happened to him is is an aberration. Okay, he had his best, most consistent. He's historically had inconsistent regular seasons. He had his most consistent regular season and his best regular season last year, and he just didn't bring it in the playoffs. Um, I really like his game. He's defensively responsible. He led the league in plus minus. He was like fourth or fifth in the league in assists. So I wouldn't not re-sign him because of the aberration that I thought occurred in the playoffs. Ginla, the reason I don't hold Krejci as accountable as Ginla is because Ginla was a rental and he's 36 years old.
Yeah.
He's not going to get any better. Krejci had his best season and he's like 27, 28 years old. So I would re-sign Krejci if that were the contract situation.
Well, and it's a pattern for Ginla. I mean, he didn't show up with Pittsburgh last year, so
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
all right. So where do we go from here, man?
Well, we go to Nesson and watch the Red Sox.
Yeah, they are back on, by the way, and they got no outs, bottom of the sixth, two men on.
What's the
Sizemore's
score?
up, still 1-0. So we got
One
got a
nothing Red Sox. Or?
no
Oh no,
Detroit. Yeah,
Detroit.
yeah.
Um.
They had the bases loaded in the first inning, and Lester got out of it with only giving up one run.
Oh, isn't Scherzer pitching or Verlander?
Scherzer, yeah, he's still in
Mm,
too. So that got a chance here. No outs, two men on to try to at least even it up. Yeah, so you got the Red Sox. That's who we'll be paying attention to for the next couple months. Don't really have much
yeah.
much football for a couple months. Got
Yeah.
some soccer. You got
Yeah.
Revolution. They pounded the Sounders 5-0.
The Seattle Sounders.
Yeah, who are and they're no slouches. They're leading um, the Western Conference. So they're leading the whole league in points, and so that's solid on the part of New England Revolution.
Yeah.
So
Go Revs.
yeah, so that's pretty much it. Just be going through the uh, the baseball season here. So
Yeah.
next we still got keep promising to talk about it, but we'll have some time now to do it to break down the Patriots schedule a little bit, do a little
Oh yeah.
little of that. Um, so that's what we'll be looking to talk about
Yeah.
in the next couple podcasts. So
Hey, and before you know it, it'll be organized team activities, OTAs,
OTAs, yeah,
training camp, and you know,
triple
Darrell
murder trial,
Revis.
triple murder trial
Oh my
for.
God, that's just insane. What the hell?
I
What the
know.
hell, Aaron Hernandez? He's a serial murderer. And this,
Serious. He's he's a he's a freaking mob boss. I mean, it's
seriously,
crazy.
right? He got into a beef with a couple of strangers at a club, and he went and murdered them outside, like later that night. What the
Yeah,
fudge?
I know. That's sad. Such a sad
Oh
tragedy.
my
It's really
God,
it's really tragic. I mean, it's really awful. I
really?
mean, we
No,
laugh about it, but
I
it
know.
really it's awful.
Oh God.
Anything else? Any last last bits on the Bruins or anything else Boston sports?
No, just I'm very melancholy the past couple of days, and thinking maybe some of that has come through in this podcast. Angry. I want explanations as to why they
Salty.
came out flat. Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to know why they just didn't perform because that was a very un-Bruin like thing to do. They
Yeah.
just didn't perform when it mattered most. That's one thing this team has always done under this recent run of success. They perform when it matters most, and they didn't. This is the last team I expected to come out and turn into stinkers like that and blow a great chance to win another cup. So I want answers. That's something I'll be looking at throughout the summer. Other than that, I'm watching the Red Sox all the time. Go Sox!
Go Sox. All right.
Yeah.
This this has been the Boston Sports Pod. You can go to bostonsportspod.com, leave comments on the blog, get in touch with us, let us know how we're doing. So I'll talk to you later, Joe.
Later, Shawn.
Go Sox.
Sox.